Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What I'm gonna be doing today is building a keyboard for my mom. She said she was doing some work, she was eating or drinking something, a little bit got on the keyboard. This is a hobby that I'm trying to get into and have built a few of my own keyboards. So I hope you like what I've done. In this video, there's gonna be some explanation, some breakdown to the stuff, and there's also going to be some breezing through sections that are rather time consuming, so I hope you enjoy. The first thing we have when talking about technicals is these switches. We have the Wook Studio Heavy Tactile switches, and it is in a 5-pin configuration. Here we have our switch opener. We can see that it has 4 contact points. This can be utilized to separate the top housing from the bottom housing. To actually open up this switch, you're just going to put the switch right in there, apply pressure to separate the two sides. The first part we have is the top housing. It's made out of nylon, followed by our switch stem. It's made out of a POM material. Next is our spring, which is a 22mm 45-gram spring. Lastly, our bottom housing, which is also a nylon material. And here's a little more of an up-close look of actually taking apart the switch. So again, the top housing, the stem, the spring, and then we have our bottom housing. Again, you can see that it is a 5-pin configuration. Now, an important part of customizing keyboards is lubricating the switches. Right here, we have a lube station from Glorious, not a sponsor. Please reach out. At the very top, we have a bunch of sections for tools. Right now, all we're going to be using is that switch opener. On the left side, you'll see that there is space for the bottom housing, top right where the plus signs are for the stems, and the bottom right for the springs. With this, it depends how many switches your keyboard will need, but this can be a very time-consuming process if you want to be thorough. Now for a closer look of lubricating switches, we're going to start by grabbing lube. I'm using the Honkid 205 GPL grade 0. You're going to grab yourself a little paintbrush. And starting with that bottom housing, we're going to lubricate the walls and the section around where the spring would go in, basically all of the contact points. You really want to be thorough. A lot of times I do a little bit of a spin move to make sure all of the places in there, because it is a small housing, actually get lubricated. Next, we're going to lubricate our springs. All you really have to do for these is lubricate the top end and the bottom end. What I like to do with these specifically is insert the paintbrush and then do, again, another little spin move so it really gets in there. After it's nice and lubed up, I'm just going to go ahead and put that spring right into the bottom housing. After the spring, we're going to be lubricating that stem. Right here, I have a stem holder. I'm going to grab it by the top portion, kind of where that switch would grab onto. And the contact points for this are only the outside. So we're just going to make sure to get a nice, good layer, but making sure it's not too thick when lubricating the stem. After making sure the entire thing is lubricated, I go back over it to take off all that excess lube. After we finish lubricating the stem, we're going to put that into the bottom housing just like we did the spring. On the stem, you see those 2 little legs that poke out. We're going to line those up with that metal leaf. Now we're all done with the lubricating. We just have to put the top housing back on. Notice there's that open side and that closed side. Same thing with the bottom housing. We're just going to make sure the open side lines up with the open side, closed side with the metal leaf or closed side, and then we're going to close it up. Those two little legs are going to line up with those leg holes, make sure that it closes on both sides, and then we test it. Now, of course, that was just one. This again is the lube station, and this is going to be all of them. Starting with the bottom housing. We then transition to the springs. With that stem grabber, we're going to grab our stems and move on to those. Lastly, that everything's lubed and put together, we're just going to grab the top housing and put them onto the bottom housing to fully close up the switches. We finished! But we have to do it 3 more times. Now I won't bore you with that, but have you ever wondered when you're pressing your spacebar or your enter key, no matter where you press it, it goes down evenly? Well, that's due to stabilizers, and that's what we're going to get into right now. With stabilizers, there's a modification called the Holy mod, and that's what we're going to be performing today. So if you see that little ramp, that's what we're going to be playing with. So you really just need a band-aid, and you need to cut it up in nice little slivers to fit inside of that area. Now I'm cutting up the entire band-aid because some of them become a little too thick, some of them a little too thin, so you just want to have a couple spares. But in every single stem of the stabilizer, you're going to want to put one of those band-aid slivers. And here we go. With the nice thin pair of tweezers, you're going to take one of those slivers of the band-aid and insert it into the stem, inserting it from the side that has the ramp going towards the flatter side. Once it's all the way through, you're just going to go ahead and pull it through with enough room on that left side, as you're seeing, for it to be able to tuck underneath. Now you may be thinking, why are we using band-aids on a keyboard? Well, it's because one of the sides are sticky so that it stays in place, but band-aids are still nice and cushy for when the contact is being made, like you actually press down on the key, it is a nice soft feeling and a little bit of a deeper sound because it's kind of dampening some of that sound as well. Now right here is where we begin that tucking action of that left side of the stem. We can see very clearly here that that right side is going up that ramp, it goes towards that flatter side, and then it gets tucked underneath, and because of the stickiness of the band-aid, it stays there nice and firm for us. With that tail of the band-aid that's still sticking out, you're just going to take some scissors and cut it off so that it doesn't get caught or stuck on anything when you're actually trying to press that key. Now, just like lubricating those switches, a 96% keyboard, which is what I'm building for my mom, has around 7 stabilizers, which means 2 stems per 14 stems. It's a lot of work. Now we have the housing, the piece that the stem actually goes into and moves up and down. This is pretty easy. You're just going to take that stem grabber tool that we used earlier, and you're going to lubricate the inside, all 4 walls of that housing. Now that the housing is lubricated, we're going to go ahead and grab that stem and lubricate the outside of the stem as well. Again, this goes inside of the housing, so we're going to want to lubricate the outside of the stem. Trying not to get too much lube on any portions of the band-aid so it doesn't seep in and maybe take away from the stickiness of the band-aid so that Holy mod stays as long as possible. Putting the two together is going to be a little hard to see, but on the housing itself, right there, you see that there's a little square that there is not on the other 3 corners of it. You're going to put the stem inside of the housing where the square is because the stem has a little cutout specifically for that square, just so you don't mess it up. Like I said, it is going to be a little hard to see, but right here you can see that little cutout in the stem, which again fits perfectly with the housing's square. Now here we are going to speed run the other housing just so we can show you how the stabilizer works together, because the full stabilizer is made out of two housing, two stems, wire that connects them. So once this one's done, we're going to connect the two. With our two housings and two stems completely done, we're going to take that wire and insert it into the side that does not have the screw. Now right here, it is hard to see, but you do see a little bit of a channel or a canal for the wire to be able to go through. And then once it's in there, you're going to make sure it clicks in place. Now this wire is actually going to go through the housing and through the stem to ensure that they stay together. An up movement in one side equals an up movement in the other, and etc. Now we're just going to make sure and do the same thing to the other side. And that is one full complete stabilizer. So with the switches and the stabilizers completed, that's almost all of the inside factors that needed to be done prior to actually opening up the keyboard. So here is a little montage of me really struggling to get inside of the keyboard itself. Whoever made this keyboard either did not want you to get inside of it or just kind of hated you, as a little keyboard enthusiast. I have a little tool. It kind of uses leverage and it's made out of a hard plastic to be able to open up, but this thing's tricky. Leverage clearly isn't working on our side, so we have a smaller tool, but it is a little thicker, so I thought maybe that would help me a little bit more. Who knows? That did the trick. We finally got inside the keyboard. Now, inside of this keyboard, because you could use Bluetooth, there are two connectors, probably one for the battery and one for the RGB. So we're just going to disconnect them so we can actually get to the PCB and start taking out the foams and doing some other modifications that we want to do to it. Now I got this little handy dandy tool from Amazon. It's a Kingston, again, not a sponsor, please reach out. But it's a little automatic screwdriver for us. Got a whole bunch of different attachments, and they're small, so it's specifically for activities like this. Now, I only saw a few screws, which should have been the first red flag for me. A little spoiler there. But I decided to take them out anyway and see what I could do about detaching the PCB from the rest of the keyboard. And as you can see, I'm struggling yet again. I really don't think this keyboard was meant to be taken apart, so spoiler, you can't. So I just started putting everything back together. Since we cannot detach the PCB from the keyboard, which is a big shame, means we can't put in our stabilizer we worked so hard to make, we can do what's called the Tempest mod, which is, as you see, just applying some painter's tape to the rear of the PCB. Now this modification is used to dampen some of that sound and make it a nice deeper or thocky sound, which people are looking for. Again, another scenario which you might be thinking, why are we doing this? I will include a video that talks about the whole physics of sound and why we're doing this mod. With this, you just want to add like 2 to 3 layers, again, on the back of the PCB. Now that that's all said and done, we can begin putting the keyboard back together. Now there was only one piece of included foam. I didn't actually add any foam to this keyboard like I usually do. So we just add that back in, connect those connectors back together, and then we clip it all back together. Now we actually put those switches and keycaps on. Next, with that switch puller, we're going to go ahead and take off all of the switches. Now that we took the switches off, we got to put the new ones on. Nice and lubricated, brand new and fresh for us. With those switches in, it is finally time to open up the keycaps and see what they look like in person for the first time. Right here we have our switch puller slash keycap remover, and look at them. Look at them go. How pretty. Into the second box we go. Who knows what could possibly be in here?
Huh?
uh, I guess I ordered two of the same thing on accident. I'm at a loss for words. Either way, we got to put them on.
Wow!
After all is said and done, I think it turned out alright. What do you think? Let me know. I'll include everything that is in this keyboard at the end.